You ever notice how every generation gets a label? Boomers ruined the economy. Millennials killed casual dining. Gen Z can't look up from their phones. We love sorting people into boxes, arguing about who had it harder, who's more sensitive, who's going to be fine. But there's one woman who keeps getting skipped in that conversation entirely. She packed the lunches this morning. She answered 3 work emails before 8 a.m. She called her mom to check on the appointment, rescheduled the contractor, and still walked into that meeting on time, looking like she had it together. Nobody asked how she managed it. She didn't post about it. She never does. This is the Gen X woman, born between 1965 and 1980, raised in a specific window of history that nobody has fully mapped yet. And what I want to talk about today isn't just who she is. It's why she is that way. Because she didn't just become independent, capable, and quietly exhausted by accident. She was built that way by a set of circumstances that left permanent marks on how she thinks, works, loves, and survives. Picture 1978. You're 8 years old. The school bus pulls away and you walk to your front door. Pull out the key that's been hanging around your neck on a shoelace all day, and you let yourself in. No parent inside, no babysitter, no one to call. You pour some cereal, turn on the TV, and you wait. By 1984, roughly 7 million kids between 5 and 13 were doing exactly that, regularly unsupervised after school. 7 million. But here's what the general Gen X story usually skips for girls. That empty house came with an extra layer. It wasn't just solitude. There was an unspoken expectation humming underneath it all. Mom was working, yes, but when Mom got home, the place should look okay. Dishes handled, younger sibling fed, something resembling order maintained. Nobody said it out loud. Nobody had to. The girls absorbed it, the way kids absorb everything, quietly and completely. So you had a generation of young girls learning 2 things at the same time. 1, nobody's coming to rescue you, so you'd better figure it out. 2, the house is your responsibility now, even if you're 9. Psychologists describe that kind of environment as high contingency. Actions connect directly to outcomes, with no buffer zone in between. You don't have a parent to intercept your mistakes or soften the consequences. You made a choice, and you lived inside whatever happened next. That kind of environment does something specific to a developing brain. It wires you to think ahead, to run the scenario before it plays out, to spot the problem before it lands. It also removes something. It removes the instinct to ask for help, because help was never part of the equation to begin with. This is where hyper-independence gets born, and it's worth being precise about what it actually is. It's not a personality type. It's not a strength or a character trait in the way people mean when they say someone's a natural leader. It was a survival response, coded into the nervous system before these girls were teenagers. The brain ran the same calculation over and over. There is no one to call, so stop looking for someone to call. After enough repetitions, it stops generating that option at all. Fast forward 30 or 40 years, and that same woman is sitting in a team meeting watching a project fall apart. She already sees the solution. She could ask someone for help getting there faster, but asking doesn't come naturally. It never has. And somewhere just below conscious thought, it still registers as failure. So she handles it herself. Again. Like she always does. The long-term cost of that latchkey childhood isn't that these women can't cope. They cope brilliantly. The cost is that they genuinely struggle to hand anything off. Delegation feels wrong. Needing support feels like a confession. And the woman who could, technically, ask for help has a brain that spent 4 decades quietly deleting that option before it could surface. She can handle anything. The problem is, she always has to. That empty house set something in motion, but the world waiting outside it made a promise that would eventually make everything worse. Gen X women were the first generation told, loudly and repeatedly, that they could have it all. Career, family, personal life, all running at the same time, all at full volume. This wasn't subtle cultural messaging. It was explicit. Magazine covers, after-school specials, the women just ahead of them cracking open corporate doors that had been locked for generations. The message was, the door is open now, walk through it, and everything else will work itself out. Nobody mentioned that the infrastructure for everything else didn't exist. No affordable childcare, no paid parental leave worth the name. Corporate culture built entirely around the assumption that someone at home was handling the rest of life, and that someone was not going to be the man in the meeting. The promise was real. The support system behind it was not. So Gen X women walked through that open door and discovered that on the other side, they were expected to run the career and still run the house, still track the kids, still manage the family calendar, still be the person who remembered the dentist appointments and the school picture days and whose turn it was to bring snacks. They didn't complain, partly because of everything that empty house had already built into them, but also because the promise came with a hidden clause. If you struggle, that's a you problem. You wanted this. You asked for equality. So handle it. And then they looked at their parents and watched the other half of the promise collapse too. Their fathers gave 30 years to companies that handed them a pink slip when the numbers stopped working. Their mothers stayed in marriages long past the point where anything real remained, because that was what you did, because forever was the contract, because leaving felt like failure. Then, throughout the 1970s and 1980s, divorce rates climbed and kept climbing. Gen X girls watched that happen in real time, sometimes in their own living rooms. They watched forever turn into a lawyer's office and a custody arrangement. The lesson didn't need explaining. It went in directly. Nothing actually lasts. Anyone who tells you it will is either lying or hasn't hit the wall yet. Psychologists call the resulting mental posture defensive pessimism. You hope the relationship holds, but you keep a financial backup plan. You hope the job is stable, but you don't let yourself need it too much. It looks like cynicism from the outside. It's actually pattern recognition built from watching the adults in the room get it wrong, repeatedly, at scale. Competence became the only thing that felt safe. Not relationships, because those end. Not institutions, because those betray you. Not promises, because those are just words until they're not. But skill that you own. If you're genuinely good at what you do, indispensable in ways that are hard to argue with, maybe the pink slip lands on someone else's desk. So Gen X women made themselves impossible to ignore through actual ability, not visibility. No fanfare. No LinkedIn posts about their professional journey. They just got sharper, faster, and more capable, and they did it quietly because drawing attention felt dangerous, not strategic. The have-it-all promise didn't liberate this generation. It doubled the workload and stripped away the permission to say it was too much. You wanted in. You got in. So carry it. Most of them did. Most of them still are. And when the load gets heavier, which it does, they don't put any of it down. They just adjust their grip and keep walking. And just when the load felt like it had found its ceiling, it didn't, because now her parents are aging, and nobody is coming to help with that either. There's a term researchers use for what Gen X women are living right now, the sandwich generation, pressed between two sets of needs at the same time, raising kids who still depend on you, while simultaneously managing parents who are starting to depend on you too. Doctor's appointments for a teenager and medication schedules for a mother with early memory issues. In the same week, sometimes the same day. School pickup and driving dad to his cardiology follow-up. And somewhere in the middle of that, a full-time job that doesn't pause for any of it. Gen X women are the ones most likely to be doing both of those things right now. Not because they volunteered, but because they're the ones who know how. Because they've always been the ones who know how. What makes this psychologically distinct is the logistics. It's what happens to your sense of self when your own needs permanently sit at the bottom of the list. Not occasionally, not during a hard season, permanently. You stop thinking of your needs as things that belong in the schedule. They become the overflow category, the stuff you get to if everything else somehow clears, which it never does. Over time, that pattern doesn't just become a habit. It becomes an identity, The woman who handles things stops being able to imagine being the woman who needs things. And none of the work shows up anywhere visible. The mental load carried by women in this position is staggering in its specificity tracking. Which parent takes which medication, and when the refill needs to happen, remembering which kid has a conflict Thursday, and which teacher responds to email versus phone, holding the emotional state of two generations simultaneously while also meeting a deadline. None of that appears on a resume. It doesn't get acknowledged in a performance review. It generates no LinkedIn posts, no applause, no recognition of any kind. It's just done, invisibly, continuously, by her. Economic pressure runs underneath all of it. As we saw earlier, this generation got hit by recession after recession, and that financial anxiety didn't fade when the markets recovered. It baked in. So alongside the caregiving and the parenting and the career, there's a constant low-level calculation running in the background. What does this cost? What if something breaks? What's the backup plan if the backup plan fails? Financial stress and caregiving stress don't just add together. They compound each other, each one making the other harder to carry. And she still won't ask for help. That's the part that doesn't change. The Latchkey programming, the defensive self-sufficiency she built in an empty house before she was 10 years old, it doesn't switch off at 50, just because the circumstances have gotten legitimately overwhelming. Asking still registers as weakness. Needing still feels like a problem she should have prevented. So she absorbs more, and she says less. And from the outside, she still looks like she's managing fine. Research backs this up. Gen X women report significantly lower rates of seeking social support during periods of high stress compared to other groups, not because they lack people who would help, but because vulnerability, the real kind, the kind where you say, I can't do this alone, feels like exposure. It feels like handing someone evidence that she's not as capable as she needs to be. So the woman who is genuinely holding two families together, managing invisible complexity on a scale most people never see, stays quiet about how much it costs her. The generation most capable of holding everything together is also the least likely to admit when it's all gotten too heavy. Here's what all of that history produces. In a woman who's now in her 40s or 50s, sitting across from you in a meeting or managing a team or running a household that would collapse without her. She has zero patience for titles that aren't backed by anything real. Not because she's difficult, because she spent her entire life earning every single thing through actual skill, in environments where nobody was handing out credit. So when someone walks in with a big job title and nothing behind it, she clocks that immediately and she doesn't forget it. Shall be professional, shall be civil. But she's already made her assessment, and it isn't changing. She watched too many incompetent people make catastrophic decisions from positions of authority. Watergate, the AIDS crisis, handled with criminal negligence while people died. Economic policies that gutted the middle class while the people making them stayed comfortable. She grew up watching authority fail, visibly, repeatedly, and the lesson wasn't, find better authority figures. The lesson was verify everything, trust what's demonstrated, not what's declared. Privacy looks different on her than it does on other generations, and it's worth understanding why. This isn't someone who doesn't understand the internet. She helped build it. She was there when it was something you dialed into with a modem, when it had actual edges. She understands exactly what it is. That's the reason she's careful. She grew up in a world where your embarrassments had a limited radius, where a bad moment stayed local. She knows what it costs when that changes. So the less people can track about her, the steadier she feels. It's not privacy as nostalgia. It's privacy as a security system she built from experience. She also holds contradictions that would exhaust someone who hadn't been trained for it. Warm but guarded, loyal but not dependent. She'll show up for your crisis without hesitation and say almost nothing about her own. She'll make a joke about something that actually hurt her, and mean the joke and mean the hurt at exactly the same time. She's the bridge. The last women who remember genuine silence, genuine boredom, the specific feeling of being unreachable and having that be completely normal. and the first ones who had to adapt to a world that reads absence as suspicious. She gave her kids the attention she never got. Sometimes she wonders quietly if she overcorrected. These women weren't broken by what they lived through. They were forged by it in ways that are still running, still shaping everything they do and carry and choose not to say. The forging was real, so is the cost, and most of them are still paying it without saying a word. If that's you, you were seen here. Subscribe for more.